What's going on, everybody? My name is Stefan Coons, and welcome to the Everyday Pursuit podcast. Not only am I the host, but I'm also the owner of Pursuit Health and Performance. That's why we created this podcast. And we are an online health and fitness coaching company. We also train in person in Gilbert, Arizona, but we train people literally all over America, several different countries. So no matter where you are, we could basically help you. A question that, and I do a lot of these on questions, right? Like people ask me a question. Oh, hey coach, some of our current clients, which we have over 100 current clients. So some of them are current clients, some of them are past clients, some of them are just people I talk to on social media, because I literally message probably like 100 people a day. I'm not even kidding. So I get a lot of questions. And one question I got was, and this was actually, I heard it from multiple current people within our program, and then also some people online. And they asked, should I cut back on carbs on my rest day? And I'm going to give you a statement, but I want to explain, right? Because I'm trying to educate you and teach you what we know as coaches and the science behind it and why I'm telling you this. Because if you're like, this guy on the podcast said don't do it, then that doesn't really help you. And it's hard to buy into things and ideologies if you can't emotionally buy into it. So let me tell you. Should you cut back on carbs on your rest days? Generally, I would say no. And here's why. Carbohydrates, when you eat carbs, they're converted to glucose, like AKA blood sugar, and glycogen, AKA blood sugar stored in the muscle. That's how they're used, okay? Yes, some carbs can be stored as fat, but it's actually very, very, very little if you look at the research. So most of it is stored in glycogen, right? Or as glucose. So the problem with cutting back on carbs is it's going to reduce the amount of glucose you have in your blood sugar and in your liver. And it's going to also reduce the amount of glycogen you have in your muscles, which is mostly the most important thing when you're strength training, because you need that glycogen there to produce ATP, which is basically the fuel to make the muscles contract. So kind of the thing about the thing about carbs is when you eat carbs, you're not using the carbs that you just ate. They have to be synthesized and broken down. You're probably releasing some blood sugar from your liver, and you're probably using what's in your muscles stored. So you have to think that like you're not eating a piece of bread, and then I know you feel like, oh, go eat before the gym, and that's what I'm using. Yeah, it might help your blood sugar regulate, but like that's still in your digestive system. Like that hasn't even been broken down into fuel yet. You know what I'm saying? So it's basically just telling your body like, oh, we consume food, you can release more energy. That's kind of what's happening. So the problem about cutting back on carbs on your rest days is like you're not using that carb. So for example, if I lifted every other day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I sit there and I lift on Monday, and then the thing too is like, if I was supposed to consume 200 carbs on Monday, right? 200, or let's say 250 grams. That's more realistic for somebody like me. So 250 grams of carbs, and I eat 250 grams of carbs. And now let's just say that's maintenance. But let's say when I work out, I'm eating 295 grams of carbs or 300 grams of carbs. Well, the problem is like, yeah, if I eat that, I can replenish my glycogen storage from lifting. I can kind of be like my muscles be full. But the problem is just through being awake and my organs and my brain and walking and all that, I'm like depleting energy. So then when I go lift in the gym, not only am I not going to probably have the same energy output, and remember, the only reason you're going to the gym and strength training is to tear down the muscles. So now I'm going to be able to lift less volume and less weight because I'm more lethargic. If you've ever had a low carb day, you have less energy. And the other thing is when you go to recover your muscles, you can't just have protein. You need to have a blood sugar spike and insulin release. Like you can't really recover your muscles without carbohydrates. Okay. So because of that, you are basically setting yourself up to go in an environment that's like not conducive to training, which means you're not going to break down as much, and not conducive to muscle building. And I know it feels like, and I used to follow this guy. I really like him. I'm not going to name drop. And he's like, earn your carbs, earn your carbs. That's a good way. That's almost like the Renaissance diet where you like eat based on like what you need for the day. And that's totally fine. But it's very hard to stick to and follow a plan where it's changing all the time. And that's why with a lot of our clients, if I say, hey, your macros, you're going to have 250 carbs a day. What about my rest day? We try to calculate it in like your exercise into your, or sorry, your nutrition and your exercise into your energy output. Like, so if my client says they work out 6 days a week for an hour, I'm going to try to adjust their carbs to match that. Yes, including their rest day. The reason too is with any scientific experiment, it's best that you have a constant and a variable. Now, the variable is exercise, because even if you did leg day 1A, you can't do leg day 1A every week and burn the exact same amount of calories. It's physically impossible. Maybe you get really close, but I don't think you would burn the exact same amount of calories. And even if you were during that workout, not throughout the whole day. However, you can eat literally the exact same amount of food, right? Like that, we know that, right? You could eat one apple that weighs 21 grams. And the next day, if you just ate one apple that weighs 21 grams, you're probably getting it very, very, very precise, right? Because we have these better measurement tools. You can't really measure that stuff. And if you're like, oh, I have my smartwatch, I'm sorry, not very accurate. Especially when we're talking about strength training, because it can't measure all the physiological metabolic things that are happening within the body. It only measures your HRV and your heart rate and stuff like that. So basically, we want to make sure, I guess, well, I want to be careful when I say this, but like you want to make sure that you're not just like jumping around too with your carbs. Like I see a lot of people that will have, 250 grams of carbs a day. And then what will happen is they'll be like, oh, on my rest days, I'm not going to have carbs. And then they realize that they feel like crap. And the next time they're like, oh, I'm going to have carbs. And their nutrition's all over the place. So now they have two variables. Now their nutrition's changing and their exercise is changing. And then they're like, if something does work, they don't know why. If it doesn't work, they also don't know why, right? You need to have something that's constant and then changing things around it. And that's why I'm like, hey, stick with your nutrition like this. Let's not adjust it. I want you to add in one more day of cardio if they can do that, right? Let's see if that helps you with the fat loss. Okay, cool. Or maybe it's a very slight adjustment, but it's not like different carbs every day. Now you could do stuff like carb cycling, but that's not just like that. That is a little bit different. But the thing about carb cycling, if you don't know, you have like more carbs on the days you train harder and less carbs on the day. It still puts you in a deficit, and it is harder to follow and it is harder to track. For some people, it's lifestyle sustainable, but I think for me, I don't actually feel that great on carb cycling because I feel like the next day I don't feel as good unless I'm lifting later in the day and I've gotten a bunch of carbs. So let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday are my high carb days, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday are my low carb days. Sure, if I'm lifting, what happens when I'm lifting in the morning on Wednesday? So I had all low carb Tuesday, and in the morning I wake up, right? Even if you're like, oh, well, eat breakfast and then go lift. Okay, but I'm not going to have as full glycogen storage as I would have if I would have just been like a moderate amount of carbs. Like I will be a little bit depleted. And then you think eating 45 minutes before, an hour before you work out, that you're going to just automatically just have all the fuel? No, you're going to perform a little bit less. And so that's why you want to kind of not lower your carbs on your rest days. And numbers wise, it's all relative. It all makes it's all like every diet is just a tool to get somewhere. So like even paleo and keto and all those, like what are they designed for? I mean, I'm sure there's health benefits, but they're mostly designed to help you like lose body fat, right? So same thing as carb cycling or earn your carbs and lowering on your rest days. It's just a way to get you to eat less food, right? To consume less calories. That is it. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Personally, for me, I like having a pretty consistent amount of carbohydrates, even on my off days, because if I do feel like, oh, wow, I kind of like went over a little bit or I'm like more fueled, I would actually rather be lower on the day I train because I can tell where the hunger is coming from. For example, if I did the Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing and I ate normal carbs on Tuesday, if I felt like, man, I kind of overate, like I could, you can feel when you overate. And I felt like I overate, too many carbs, maybe bloated, whatever. And then on Wednesday, I could wake up, do a fasted workout or not. And then if I feel like besides my post-workout meal being a lot of carbs, if I feel like I'm still using those carbs carried over from the other day, I don't have to eat before I work out. Maybe I do it fasted, deplete myself a little bit more, and then have, a little bit less carbs. So instead of having 250 carbs, maybe I have 200 carbs. I'm like, I don't feel like I need it. So is that reducing your carbs? Sure. But I am setting myself up to train at the highest intensity. That's number one. And I'm also setting myself up to have enough fuel to recover. Other than that, I don't really care. And that's why a lot of people say eat around your training. Pre workout, post workout is the most important meals. Why? Because you need enough fuel to train very intensely. And then you also need enough fuel to recover from the intense workout. Everything in between doesn't really matter, like food timing, nutritional timing, all the like fasted and intermittent fasting. It's all pretty relative. Um, as long as you have enough fuel. Now, if you're somebody that can lower your carbs on your rest days and you don't see any performance, then sure. But at that point, you're just carb cycling. Like you're not saying it, but you're carb cycling. You're going lower on your rest days, higher on the days you train. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just think skimping on carbs on your rest days for me don't work well. Now, if I have a day where I'm doing this and I'm recording 700 million podcasts and I'm just sitting all day and I didn't work out, will I eat less carbs during that day? Depends. If I have a really intense workout the next day, probably not. I might go a little bit lower, like 20 grams lower, 25 grams lower. But really, I just have the same because I train 5, 6 days a week. So cool, this is just going to my recovery. I'm going to use all this tomorrow. And if I felt like I don't need as much tomorrow because I really overdid it today, then I'm fine. Right. Like it is kind of this like yin and yang balanced out thing. Um, but hopefully this episode was helpful. I know it's a little bit shorter, which you probably appreciate, but like I said, I wouldn't really skimp if it was me, if it was my body and my physique, because the thing too is I want, like with our clients, I want them to stay as consistent with their nutrition as possible. The only way you can do that for most people in the beginning is having something that's a plan. Like everybody goes, oh, if I had a plan, if I knew what to do, if I could follow something, how are you supposed to follow a plan that changes all the time? Right? I worked at Amazon for like 3 weeks and I'm not going to lie, I was miserable. They're like, every day is day one, not a good place to work, in my opinion, because it changed every single day I was there. So I was new trying to learn doing stuff as like a part-time thing during the holidays, and it was changing every day. That's not a good plan, right? Like let people adapt, let people get good at what they're going to do. And then once they're experienced, then they can change things, right? And so that's what we do with our clients. We're like, no. I'm not going to have you like changing your carbs, do the carb cycling. Like just eat really consistent, because Coach Bryce, Coach Mike, all of our coaches could tell you this. The people that are the most consistent with their nutrition are the ones that have the best success. How do you stay consistent? By it being something that you can like do without thought. Like, oh, this is just do this. It's just what I eat. Same breakfast every morning, same dinner. Maybe my lunch changes a little bit. And then they just do that for an extended period of time and they get a really good physique. So that's it. But it's hard to stay consistent when you're freaking changing stuff all the time. And then you probably drive yourself crazy. Like, well, I kind of rested today, but I went on a walk. So now I don't know how many carbs to eat, and blah, 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 blah. Unless you're like a top tier intuitive eater, then you're going to struggle. Like I'm there, but I've been lifting and doing this for 17 years. You're probably not there. So if you think that you're just going to be able to like, just see how I feel, probably not. I do have some clients that lower a little bit on their rest days, and they are pretty good intuitive eaters. They've been working with me for a few years. Those people, it's maybe not a bad idea. Now I do tell them though, like, hey, but when you go to the gym, you better be at the same performance. If you feel like it's lacking at all, you need to have more carbs during your rest day, right? And like I said, most of them aren't doing like 250 to 100 carbs. It's not this like drastic drop. It's like, I'm going to have 200 carbs instead of 250. Sure, if that helps you stay leaner. But again, it's some experimentation. You have to go back and forth and test things out and see like what's going to work for you. Exercise science is exactly that. It's science, it's experimentation. So there is a little bit of seeing what macros work for you, seeing if lowering carbs on your rest day is going to make you feel like crap. Is it going to give you the same amount of energy? I've done everything in between. And personally, I'd rather eat the same amount of carbs. But then if I want to burn more body fat, I personally like to just add in more exercise, because there's a dual benefit. You are losing more weight, Plus, you're getting all the physical things, and long term, you're in better results, which helps, or better shape, which helps you stay more lean. Like eating less is totally fine. It's the best option in the first place. It's the most time efficient. But I'm actually on the opposite end of maybe of what a lot of coaches say. And I think adding in more exercise to a certain extent is actually a better thing. And it teaches people to move, right? Like I can't tell you how many clients that I've seen from other coaches, and even some in our program, not this specific one, Pursue Alpha Performance, but in my other past life of coaching, that really struggled like being consistent with fitness because it wasn't a lifestyle. It wasn't. It was like, oh, I do like 2 to 3 days a week. And so it's easy to blow it off. But when you make movement and exercise like part of your daily thing, it feels weird that you don't do it. Like if you're like, oh, I go poop every day and you don't poop, you're like, wow, I feel off today. Like this is really weird. So maybe a bad analogy, but like it's the same thing. If I don't exercise or move my body, I'm like, oh man, I kind of crave it. So that's how I know, that is actually how I know I'm going to stay in shape for the rest of my life, because it is part of me now. And so I am always a proponent in like adding in movement. I think it's a little bit better. It doesn't always have to be intentional, like exercise in the gym, but like walking, being active, because we sit in a society that is very, very sedentary compared to where we used to be 20, 30, 50 years ago. Um, but hopefully this episode was helpful. Hopefully there's some more clarity on what you should do on your rest days as far as carbohydrates go. And by the way, fats and proteins literally stay the same. Nothing changes, same macros. I think if you're going to adjust from anywhere, I would adjust from your carbs though. For most people, protein stays the same. Fat definitely stays the same. If you're on like a really, really low carb, high fat diet, it might look a little bit different. But for most people, you don't need any drastic changes. So I appreciate it. And if you guys have any questions, go hit us up at pursuehp.com or on Instagram at pursue_HP. If you need to chat with a coach, you want some specific nutrition advice, hit me up on there and I'll help you out however I can.